The character of Héra is the type of protagonist who is just great at everything. She can do no wrong. She has no flaws. And it's almost like they just do that to make up for the fact that, well, she's a female character and she needs to be empowered. She needs to be more powerful and greater than anybody else. I'm just like, but by doing that, you're taking so much away from her. There's nothing wrong with characters having flaws. I think some of our favorite characters in fiction have flaws. Some of our favorite characters in The Lord of the Rings are flawed people, from Bilbo to Frodo to Boromir to everyone else. Like, they're not all perfect, but they all come together to try to do the best that they can, in this grand conflict. And when you just introduce a character who is just amazing at everything, is so great, and everyone tells you how great they are, right? You take away an interesting aspect of them. All right, my friends, let's go ahead and get to my review for The Lord of the Rings, and sadly, chat, heavy emphasis on that, The War of the Rohirrim. So, for those that don't know, I've talked about this quite often here on this platform and others. I am a big fan of the original Lord of the Rings film trilogy directed by Peter Jackson. I don't think it's a controversial thing to say that it is one of the greatest film trilogies of all time. It's a classic, chat. I remember watching those movies 20 years ago, over 20 years ago in the theater, and just being blown away by it. It was just all those wonderful characters in that rich, fantastical fantasy world. I mean, everyone from Bilbo and Frodo and Sam and all the other hobbits and Gandalf and the rest of the Fellowship. It's just absolutely incredible. And yeah, I've seen those movies time and time again, whether it be on television, VHS, or eventually getting the Blu-rays, watching those extended editions, those 4+ hour ones. And yeah, it's just, it's amazing. It's amazing. And even before then, like I have since read the Lord of the Rings books, obviously. I've always preferred The Hobbit, though. I've always loved the Hobbit book. I remember, like, for 10 years, I read that book like every single year of that decade. There's an amazing story, just focusing on the character of Bilbo Baggins, finding the courage within himself to succeed in this grand adventure, right? And so when eventually it was announced that they were going to do a Hobbit film adaptation, I was so excited about it. But then they heard they're going to split into 2 movies, and a bunch of directors were attached. And Guillermo del Toro was one of the last directors attached before he left, and they brought back Peter Jackson. I thought, well, even though he had some failures in between all that. I wasn't the biggest fan of King Kong, to be perfectly honest. I know it has its fans. I was not one of them. Didn't care for that movie, The Lovely Bones, that he did. Oof, no thank you. I thought, hey, who? I mean, he's the guy. He's the one you want. And then the movie started coming out, and despite, like, some good things in them, like the stuff that's actually from the book, the movies were a disappointment because it was just Warner Brothers wanting to capitalize on the popular and success of the previous trilogy, and they took the shortest of all of Tolkien's books, of those 4 books, I should say, The Hobbit, and they expanded into a trilogy, which is completely unnecessary, trying to connect it to The Lord of the Rings, made it very, very frustrating. I mean, literally the last movie is an adaptation of, like, 2 chapters of The Hobbit. It's like, what are you doing? And so that's been definitely one of the biggest disappointments, for me, certainly from the 2010s in terms of just film, right, in the medium. And then, recently we have the Rings of Power, and I know that's not really connected to the movies or whatever, the Hobbit films, but, it's like Amazon adapting the appendices, which they have access to. And listen, I know season 2 came out. I didn't watch it because I really, really downright hated season 1. It didn't feel like The Lord of the Rings at all. And it was, they were focusing on things that I never really found all that interesting. And the way in which they wrote these characters, how these actors were performing as them, I just found very, very frustrating, very disappointing. So The Lord of the Rings as a property has been in a very weird place. Like, I guess they've had some successes with maybe some of the video games. I think, honestly, outside the movies, like within the last 20 years, the games have been kind of the big successes, whether it be the direct kind of video game adaptations of the films, or like the Third Age RPG. That was really cool. Remember that? That was an awesome RPG. And then like you had Shadow of Mordor, which was fun. So yeah, I guess some of the video games have been good. Not that Gollum game. Less said about that, the better. But yeah, in terms of film and television, Lord of the Rings has certainly struggled. However, that brings us to the War of the Rohirrim. An animated movie, a movie that I was really looking forward to because I'm a huge fan of 2D animation, especially theatrical 2D animation, and we just don't see that anymore, outside of, things coming from the East, like, Studio Ghibli, releasing a film however, many years, right? And I was hoping that this would reignite interest in Lord of the Rings adaptations, and just 2D animation in the theatrical environment in general. I thought that was really cool. Plus, the film itself has some talent behind it. The movie is directed by Kenji Kamiyama, which, in case you guys don't know that name, you might have seen some of his work. He's worked on a ton of anime for decades. One of my personal favorites is Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. Not the movie, but the series. And I actually liked that particular series even more than the original Ghost in the Shell film from the 90s. I thought it was so great. So I was like, okay, they're bringing this guy in, and they got, a animation studio, an anime animation studio with a nice pedigree. So I was like, okay, this is cool. And it's telling a story that I like, just by the general description, sounds really interesting. It takes place about 2 centuries, 180 years or so before the events of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Fellowship and everything. And it focuses on the region of Rohan. We follow this king, Helm Hammerhand, and how Rohan gets in a dispute with this opposing force, and this big war happens between them, and eventually a lot of the conflict takes place at the fortress that will later be named after Helm himself, Helm's Deep. And it's like, okay, that's pretty cool, and kind of focusing in this little area and telling this story. I like that. It's based on the appendices of some of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I think specifically like several paragraphs worth that kind of like tells this story, right? And I was like, all right, this is kind of cool. We're going to focus on this king, him protecting his people against this threat after this dispute that they had over this like marriage pact that just pretty much fell apart. I'm like, all right, this is cool, right? It takes place within the Lord of the Rings world, but it's not going to try constantly try to connect to the Lord of the Rings, because that would just be really frustrating, like constant fucking Easter eggs just shoved in your face going, huh? I mean, I wouldn't like that. Well, the movie we got is not exactly what I was hoping for, sadly. Instead of focusing on the character of Helm Hammerhand and his conflict, instead the filmmakers and the writers opted to focus it more on Helm's unnamed daughter, which they took upon themselves to name Héra. And I think that is kind of one of the big mistakes that they made, is by kind of moving away from Tolkien's works and doing their own thing with it. Now, I think one of the frustrating aspects of this movie is how underdeveloped a number of the characters feel. Like, Helm Hammerhand is actually quite great in the book. He has a wonderful presence in the movie. And, I mean, anytime he does a speech, it's suitably epic. His conversations with other characters are really interesting to me. Plus, he is voiced by Brian Cox, which really helps. And that guy knows how to deliver his speech and be very charismatic. I was like, I really like this character. And he is in a lot of the movie. He's just not the focus, because the focus is on the character of Héra, voiced by Gaia Wise, who I'm not very familiar with. But I gotta say, like, I found her character to be really lackluster and to be very dull. And it's the kind of character, and listen, I'm not one of those people. It's like, oh, it's a woman. You made the woman a lead. It's like, I don't want none of that stuff. I don't need no goddamn bra. My Lord of the Rings. Like, no, I'm not one of those people. But the character of Héra is the type of protagonist who is just great at everything. She can do no wrong. She has no flaws. And it's almost like they just do that to make up for the fact that, well, she's a female character and she needs to be empowered. She needs to be more powerful and greater than anybody else. I'm just like, but by doing that, you're taking so much away from her. There's nothing wrong with characters having flaws. I think some of our favorite characters in fiction have flaws. Some of our favorite characters in The Lord of the Rings are flawed people, from Bilbo to Frodo to Boromir to everyone else. Like, they're not all perfect, but they all come together to try to do the best that they can, in this grand conflict. And when you just introduce a character who is just amazing at everything, is so great, and everyone tells you how great they are, right? You take away an interesting aspect of them. You don't make them feel human, and that's what they end up doing with Héra. And this doesn't help that a lot of her dialogue is just not delivered all that very well by Gaia Wise. And I just found the focus on her to be dull. I mean, you have other characters in this movie of the main villain, if you will, who originally is betrothed to Héra, but that, goes awry for a variety of reasons in the film Wulf, and I just didn't really find him a compelling bad guy, especially when compared to other notable Lord of the Rings antagonists, whether it be Gollum or Saruman. Hell, even Sauron, the big giant flaming eye, has more charisma than this guy. I just found him not very threatening or particularly interesting. You do have some members of the original Lord of the Rings cast return in some form. With Miranda Otto, she reprises her role as Éowyn. She is the narrator of the movie. And it's nice to hear her, but that's the thing. Like watching this movie and hearing Miranda Otto's voice throughout it, it's Lord of the Rings. Like, yes, it does focus mostly on male characters, but when it does introduce female characters, especially in the Jackson trilogy, because he does do more things with them than in the original novels, right? In the original books, through, Arwen and especially Éowyn. But he shows that they are not perfect. They have flaws, but they overcome these things to do amazing things in the movie, especially Éowyn. I mean, in one of the best scenes in Return of the King, when she takes it upon herself, though she is outmatched by the Witch King, right? The leader of the Nazgul, one of Sauron's chief lieutenants. Hell, you can say he's Sauron's second, his successor almost. When she is finally able to get the upper hand in that battle, him saying, like, no man can kill me, she takes off her goddamn helm. She says, I am no man. And she skewers the son of a bitch. And you feel that. And it doesn't feel unearned. It feels earned because of everything. She gets her ass kicked through a lot of that fight. But she perseveres, and that's such a wonderful, great feeling. With Héra, there's never a single goddamn scene, even though when they show her and she's being a badass because the plot requires her to be, not because it feels natural. You don't get that same feeling. And I almost wish that the filmmakers and the writers of this movie looked more to Éowyn and said, let's even though, again, maybe they should have focused on Helm to begin with, but it's like, let's actually follow a flawed, interesting character who's able to persevere instead of someone who is just immediately great at everything that they do. I think that's just a huge mistake. Now, when it comes to the technical aspects of the film, I think the animation at times is absolutely stunning and gorgeous. Like, I love anime, I love 2D animation, but at times it's also a mixed bag. Like, you have these like beautiful backgrounds and environments, looks cool. You have these fight scenes that look great, but then there's some times where the frame rate, it's chugging. It just starts going, it just starts getting super jerky. And we go from like super jerky animation then to fluid animation. It's like, I'm getting fucking whiplash here. It's like, Jesus Christ, just make a goddamn choice. And apparently this movie was fast-tracked. Its development was fast-tracked. Like, they made most of it within under a year. And I think you can tell. I think that has inevitably hurt the final product because the animation at times just looks very odd and weird and just it's sometimes uncomfortable to watch, which I found really disappointing because I love this style. I want to see more. I want this to become mainstream here in America in the West. And this is not a great showcase of it. I think a lot of people will probably dislike and go like, ew, no thank you. No, just go back to 3D. And it's a damn shame, They cut corners. It's obvious that they cut corners with this. And also the film's pace. This is a 2+ hour movie, and you feel it, and there's a lot of downtime between characters, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like in The Lord of the Rings, those are very long movies, and some people have said like those movies are too long. But even when we're not, seeing this huge fantasy world and these beautiful landscapes, we're just having these wonderful moments between these characters. These great conversations, whether it be, between Frodo and Gandalf, and like, I don't know, thinking of like watching this movie, I just thought like there was never a conversation in this film that matched the conversation that Frodo and Gandalf had when Frodo wished Bilbo killed Gollum in the cave. And Gandalf explains, why Bilbo chose to do what he did and how honorable and how good it was. And I just thought it's like, yeah, nothing in this film matches that conversation, which maybe people won't necessarily bring up all the time because they'll think of maybe some of the epic speeches and things. But that's what I wanted in this movie, and it lacked that. It lacked that subtlety and that warmth. And outside of that, there's just so much fan service in this movie trying to connect it to the original trilogy where it just doesn't need to be there. Or like they just have like a scene where you just have all these orcs trying to find, or goblins or whatever, they're ring collectors, they're trying to find a ring. And I'm just like, oh my God, guys, what does this have to do with the conflict that's actually going on in the movie? It's just like, because this is Lord of the Rings and, they're trying to find, Sauron's ring, which, sets up Lord of the Rings, right? Yes, don't you like that? They bring in Saruman in the film at one point, and they use old audio of Christopher Lee, and then they're mentioning other notable characters. Chad, you can guess, who it's another wizard character. He likes to smoke, that hobbit pipe weed and things. And that to me is just unnecessary. That's like the worst. It's that heavy-handed fan service that is not in service of any of the characters or the story that they're telling, which is just this regional conflict in Rohan. It's like, why even bothering? And it's just to connect it. People go like, that's why you should watch the Lord of the Rings movies. And yeah, it's a mixed bag of a film with some good ideas, but it decides to focus on the least interesting things, the least interesting characters, or stuff that we've known about for so long that is just not relevant to the story that they're taking. So you're just kind of left with a half-decently animated film taking place in the world of J.R.R. Tolkien. And then by the end of it, you're asking yourselves, like, should they even have told this story? What was the point? Because they seemingly just weren't interested in telling it because they were so busy trying to connect it to this thing or that thing, and not actually concentrate on making their characters more interesting instead of just making them an overpowered badass because, well, the plot requires it. So, yeah, it's not the worst movie this year. It's not making my worst of list, but this is definitely one of the biggest disappointments that I've had the displeasure of watching theater, because I was actually really, really excited for this movie. I was hoping it was going to, because I love 2D animation, especially theatrically. I love anime and just that look. And I thought, wow, what an interesting approach to J.R.R. Tolkien and his world and Lord of the Rings and things. Like, yeah, let's see that. And there are moments of like, wow, this is cool and this is really interesting, but they just drop the ball and you just get a very mediocre product at the end of the day. So, yeah, chat. The Lord of the Rings, the War of the Rohirrim is a disappointment. But what about you guys? What did you think of War of the Rohirrim? Did you like it? Were you more kind of mixed, disappointed like me? Or did you just downright fucking hate every minute of it? Let me know.
5 minutes later.
Let's see what you guys are saying. Hate the Hobbit movies. Bishop Sycamore says, I hate the Hobbit movies as concept. 2 movies too long. And 100% agree with you. Yes, right there with you. And watch all these stuff with member berry nonsense. Yeah. Yep. Let's see here. Stanlow Complex is great. I agree with you. Yeah. I was excited about this. Malcolm, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. Goddamn good times to be a Lord of the Rings fan, but I'm going to play that over the weekend. That sounds good. So you go, yeah, and the lip sync was bad. Oh, yeah, you're right about that. I know it's anime, but there were times the lips were still moving. That was being said. You're correct. Yep. Yeah, the studio will say, well, 2D is obviously the problem. Yeah, that's exactly what they're going to say. Do you remember Lord of the Rings? Because I remember Lord of the Rings. That's what he wants you to know. We truly didn't need a Lord of the Rings anime. I'd rather have a Family Matters anime. Well, I don't know if I want that, but but I did. I'm not against that though. I think that's interesting. It's because clearly the live action stuff has not been working. So it's like, okay, let's try this in a different medium. I think it's a really good idea. It's just the execution of a lot of the things just didn't work. Now, I want to Meet the Fables anime. I would love a Meet the Fables anime. That'd be really cool. Yeah, more like Borther or Rohirrim, says Space Cowboy, like you. I was excited at the idea of Lord of the Rings anime, but sadly it didn't work for me due to the animation, given I feel it's the wrong style for the story, and it's even expressive enough to stand out. They needed a more Ghibli-esque out. Yes, if this was like done by Studio Ghibli, that would be pretty amazing. And the lackluster writing and characters made this very dull experience for me. Yeah, I agree. I keep nodding off watching. Yeah, it's dull. It's dull. Yep. Heard people were mixed on this movie. I want to check this out, but I'd rather wait until... Oh, it says 4K. Excuse me, 4K. I heard people were mixed on this movie. I want to check this out, but I'd rather wait until it hits VOD. Yeah, I'd wait to stream. I mean, again, I'm never going to discourage someone from not seeing something, right? You might end up really liking it. A lot of people might end up liking this, you know? It's just, for me, it just didn't really work. Ever since Rings of Power, I'm pretty skeptical on Lord of the Rings. I think me too, man. It's just... When you really think... I'll continue reading your post. They're even doing a Gollum movie. Yeah, I know. I'm just like, I don't want that. I'm not getting my hopes up for that. Yeah, The Hunt for Gollum, which takes place like in between certain moments of the Fellowship of the Ring. I'm just like, I don't really need this. And it's directed by Andy Serkis, who I'm not really... Listen, Andy Serkis is an incredibly talented actor. Right, I've loved. He was amazing as Gollum. He should have gotten an Academy Award nomination, if not one. Should have been nominated for playing Caesar in the Planet of the Apes trilogy. There's no question about that. He's done some great stuff. I mean, even recently, like in his several episodes of Star Wars in Andor, he was wonderful in that show. Right, he's a very talented man. But as a director, I just haven't been a big fan, and especially like the Venom Let There Be Carnage is like, ugh. Well, I did like his one movie that he did with Andrew Garfield. I forgot. I think it was called Breathe. That wasn't too bad. But spectacle filmmaking, I don't know. I'm right there with you. I'm just not excited about the idea of that movie whatsoever. But that's the thing. Like Warner Brothers and New Line, they have this property. They have the books and things and whatever the appendices that they own. You know, it's all weirdly owned by different people or whatever. And it's like you had those original 4 novels, right? And yeah, they fucked up with The Hobbit, but that they nailed it with the original trilogy. And outside of that, there's like really nothing else. I know people say the Silmarillion stuff, but it's not like an actual narrative. It's literally just the history of this world. These characters aren't really defined all that much. And I think that's where they're running into the issue. They're the people that they're getting to try to define these characters are just not good at defining them. They're not talented enough to do it, you know, and I think they're just focusing on the wrong things for, you know, whatever reason. And they want to try to keep this alive and keep it going, but it's just not working. I think the one thing that has been working somewhat has clearly been the video games, as I mentioned before. I mean, yes, Gollum game notwithstanding, obviously that was a huge fucking flop. But like, you know, the Shadow games, some of the RPGs that they've done, it's like, okay, this is, you know, do that. The strategy games that they've made, Battle for Middle-earth and stuff like that, it's like those could have been a success. But all these other things, all these other attempts, in my opinion, have not worked. Like, the only thing, honestly, that I would want them to do at this point is to just remake The Hobbit. Just do The Hobbit as a standalone movie. Yeah, excuse me. You could connect it to The Lord of the Rings. It could be part of the trilogy. But just have it be one film. Like, I would love if they just redid it and just say, yeah, you know, we did the trilogy, whatever, but here's the real Hobbit movie. That's kind of what all I want, and the likelihood of that is, you know, unlikely. So, but yeah, like all these other things, I'm just like, yeah, I just don't really care. Let's see. I'm not sure what's worse, been a bad movie or a disappointment. Yeah, I mean, well, it's better than Kraven the Hunter. You know, you don't want to be a Kraven the Hunter. No one wants to be a Kraven the Hunter, so it definitely has that. You can wear that on its person. Bishop says I was skeptical of the trailer, so I wasn't hyped in the beginning. Fair enough. Still not, to be honest. Yeah. Eyes are good to see it. I don't think the callbacks to Lord of the Rings were as in your face in this compared to The Hobbit and Rings of Power, at least until the very end. It's just like, it's very much in your face. Gollum movie at the Gollum game? Yeah, it's the Hunt for Gollum. It's like when Gandalf and Aragorn, Strider, go after Gollum, apparently. I said, but holy shit, some of the animation outside the action scenes are terrible. Agreed, man, agreed. Notice those recycled idle animations at times. Oh, yeah. I'd be excited for the Hunt for Gollum that these post-Lord of the Rings entries haven't been striking out these days, and they all have. They all have, at least in my opinion. Casey, I've lost hope in them after the Rings of Power. Lord of the Rings has not been good since going to Amazon. Nobody knows what to do with it. Yeah, well, Amazon, like, again, the property is split out among these different studios. Amazon owns some of the appendices stuff, but then New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers own the rest of it, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the Silmarillion is very much a Bible for Middle-earth, and, you know, it's clearly hard to adapt that. Or at least they have the wrong people trying to adapt it. For example, Rings of Power has interesting stuff in it, but overall it's lukewarm. Yep. We need a whole long TV series video game for the Silmarillion. It's like, yeah. Oh, no, I agree with you. They're going to do that. I don't want them, but they will. Like, the one thing that they will do is they will definitely remake the trilogy. I think I wouldn't be shocked the next few years that they do announce it. Like in the last half of the 2020s into the 2030s, I would not be surprised. They'll either remake it as a new film trilogy or they'll remake it as a TV series for HBO Max. I think that's going to happen. Now, I'm not basing this on any evidence or something. It's just like, you know what? Because they keep striking out all these other things, they'll be like, all right, let's go back to the fucking well, and we'll just do that. Sorry, Chris. So I think you're right, Biggie Smith. Deadpool says, sorry, Chris, best we can do is a Hobbit series. 9 seasons? Yep, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that's what they're probably going to do. I was thinking of my animated Hobbit. And look what they're doing with Harry Potter. That's barely over 10 years old now. I was thinking of my animated Hobbit film thing. Yeah, I know. We did a watch for that. Like, the only Hobbit movie you need to watch, guys, is the 1977 Rankin Bass Hobbit movie. That thing was a fucking blast. They nailed that. They even exercised some material from the book, but you didn't feel it. Hey, some card load. Edgy Buzzarker coming. Good to have you here, Edgy. Welcome. The War of the Rohirrim, more like the War of the Ho-Hum. Agreed. I did not see it, but it doesn't look interesting, honestly. It's not. It's really not. It's actually really dull. It's really dull for the most part, which is sad. Big Smith, Lord of the Rings, Modern Warfare. Dil Marie not wrong. Yeah, it's sad. It's sad, chat. You know, we'll see, though. We'll see. Lord of the Rings TV series, remake alongside Harry Potter 1. Yep, I think so. I'll tell you what. Because I don't know when that series is exactly supposed to come out. I assume that the first season will come out 2026. Because I don't think it's going to come out, it won't come out in 2025. They're going to film in 2025. Let's say it comes out in 2026, and if it's a success, you know, I bet you when that series premieres and everything, and or however deep we are into that season, they will announce a Lord of the Rings series, and it will be an adaptation of the original books again. They might even start with The Hobbit. They might do The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, and it'll be a TV series. I think that's what they're going to do. So, yep. Guessing I like this better than most since I'm sick of everything having to revolve around old characters and events from Northern Trilogy. If anything, this made me at least want a Helm Hammerhand. Well, that's the thing, because he has hands for everybody. You know, he fucking does. There's no doubt. He's the best character in the film. Brian Cox is the best job. His daughter, Héra, I just found completely uninteresting throughout the movie. And the decision that to give her literally no flaws, I think it was is a huge mistake. You know, we like our characters that have flaws because that makes them interesting. And they just don't do it with them. It's mostly all humans. There are orcs or goblins, there are trolls, there's that, but it doesn't really focus on the other races. It's mostly humans within the region of Rohan. I guess you get some of the wizards in there too. So 2026 when it comes out, yeah, but it's mostly all humans in the movie. With how popular Harry Potter is, I'm not sure if the show will fail unless it is truly awful, not fail-proof, but I bet it does well, at least for one season. Yeah, no, we'll see. I mean, you know, you can imagine one season per book, unless they start splitting up, you know, even more, which I would not be surprised if they do that. So, we like when characters overcome their flaws, 100%. 100%. Yeah, and, you know, this movie, they don't do that, which is a shame, which was what makes it so dull, in my opinion. Thinking back about it, I was trying to actually think of a flaw she has, and her biggest flaw is making Wulf simp so hard. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, Wulf's a fucking bitch in this. I was like, I can't be. He's the villain of the movie. I'm just like, yeah, I can't take you seriously. And he's always pulling these like little bitch moves. He's always surrendering or not, and then not surrendering. He's like, I surrender. No, I don't. Stab! You know, he's a cuck. Yeah, he's 100% a cuck in the movie. It's like, I can't take this guy seriously. But you're right. Yeah. Héra is just, she's just great because the movie is telling you she's great. And I'm just like, don't do that. And I am not one of those guys who is, and nor do I think anyone else is here, is like, there's a woman in my movie or video game. How dare you? But you need to make, whoever the character is, I don't care what sex they are, I don't care what race, in this area, you need to make them interesting. Flaws is not a bad thing at all. It's I'm not one of those guys who are like, woke. It's so hard to define. What even is woke now? Right? But I noticed it in the movie. Okay? And so it's like, this is not working. And it just resulted in a dull film. Do women's. I do say that. I do say do women's though. That's true. I'll give you that, Deadpool. So yeah, chat, Lord of the Rings, and heavy emphasis on that, the War of the Rohirrim, not very good in my opinion. A disappointment. Sometimes good, has its moments, but overall, a disappointment. Oh man, chat. But time to farm the anti. Let's do it. No. Just want to be honest. Just want to be truthful. Just to share my opinion on it. Oh, with that, I think they tried to pull the whole Studio Ghibli thing of strong female character, but those characters actually go. Here's the thing, with those, because yes, a lot of the Studio Ghibli movies. That's a good point. You bring up a very good point, Isaac. A lot of the Studio Ghibli movies have a main character who is a woman, but in all those movies, those characters are flawed and go through incredible adversity. They are humbled at every corner that they turn, whether it be in Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, or Princess Mononoke, or Kiki's Delivery Service, or anything else like these. They go through the goddamn ringer, and they suffer, and they lose a lot. But despite everything, despite their flaws, they are able to persevere. But they need to struggle for it, and that makes it interesting for us as the viewers. Where Héra, fucking struggle at all because she's great at everything. That's the thing. So, good point. It's a good point. Yeah, they definitely were trying to do that, but they ignored the things that make those movies so good. The struggle creates growth, 100%. 100%. Doesn't hate woman, just ignores them. Yes, that's true. What'd you say?
Literally Bill's character.
Yeah. Katria says, the struggles and adversity and the flaws of Bill's character, 100%. Yeah.